Welcome to the Joyosity Podcast. We are so glad that you are here and ready to grow as a leader. Whether you are a seasoned leader, you're just starting out, we are here for you. And we base our work every week on these three bedrock beliefs. One is that true leadership requires more than just the surface and checklists. It requires a profound commitment to everything that makes us human. And number two, we need genuine curiosity. And with that curiosity, we can create positive culture with all those complex people that we deal with every single day. And three, joy is the heartbeat of a healthy leader and a healthy organization. So we're putting joy and fun and play right in the center of what we do. And every week we bring you dynamic conversations with experts and leaders who have lived it, who have researched it, and they're bringing you the real deal and more than just a couple tips. Because what we want is a movement that you are creating positive culture where you are. So I'm Jenn Whitmer, your host. I'm an international speaker and leadership consultant and all-around joy bringer, hosting you and guiding you along the way so we can get from all of these big ideas into the action, into your desk and your conference room that will make a difference and face all of these challenges that you face as a leader at living in a dynamic world. And we are welcoming Justin Jones-Fosu back. He is an international speaker, a social entrepreneur, an author, again, a mountain climber, which I still can't quite get my head around. It's fine. A Florida radio host and workplace contributor to NPR's The Takeaway. And we are having part two of our conversation with Justin. So if you missed part one, we were digging into the idea of how do you respectfully disagree? Because his new book is called I Respectfully Disagree. And we have some great points. So make sure that you go back and listen to that, because today we're really going to dive into, well, how do we make that happen? So let's welcome Justin for part two of our conversation. Welcome back.
Joy to the world, Jenn Whitmer has come.
Oh, I'll take it. I shall take it. So glad that you are coming back with us today. And this idea I talk about how you get to joy through conflict and through miscommunication. And last week we really dug into this idea of respectfully disagreeing means that you are still absolutely for someone's humanity, even when you disagree in opinions, and the openness that it takes, the open-heartedness that it takes to really do that work. And we gave you, so listen to last week, we talked about the business outcomes, all that kind of stuff. And today we're really going to dig into, well, okay, great. That feels like a big idea. That feels really daunting. How do we start doing this? And especially for the people who are like, but my workplace is like, they're not doing that. So how do I begin to do that, even if I'm not the one who manages everything? So what do you suggest for people who are in that space? They're like, I don't really know where to begin. What's a good place to start?
Yeah, so I'll walk through my pillars, but I want to tell it to you in story form. So I'll just give you kind of the high level of the pillars. Our five
I love
pillars is really our how-to. And the first is challenge your perspective, which happens before any disagreement even occurs. It's intentionally putting yourselves in positions of hearing perspectives that are different than yours, that even if you disagree with. And the goal is to build those muscles so that when you're in disagreements, that you've already exercised those. Pillar number two is be the student, where you focus more on listening and learning rather than lecturing. And so we've been challenging people, like, instead of trying to win an argument or debate, or even which project is going to win, what if the new winning was learning? What if it was you learned something about yourself, that other person, or that other person's perspective? Pillar number three is cultivate your curiosity. It's where we focus more on filling in the gaps with curiosity rather than conclusions, which is really what my TEDx was about. Don't take the exit on people. And it's really about asking more questions, but more meaningful questions. Pillar number four is seek the gray. And we know that there are many shades of that, but it's where we find common ground, not middle ground. We've been challenging this concept of middle ground, because middle ground implies 50-50, but common ground implies that there's something there that we both share. And last but not least, is pillar number five is agree to respect. And notice I didn't say agree to disagree, because I've seen a lot of people agree to disagree very disrespectfully and without joy. And so what we're challenging is, how do I leave people feeling humanized and fully seen, but also giving them an opportunity to feel fully acknowledged? So, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll press pause because I want to share a story, but what are your reactions to those five pillars?
Oh my gosh, I love all of them. And I think that they're so important. And if you are a leader, one of the things I want to remind you of, if you take those 5 pillars, it is easy because you feel a little challenged and it feels daunting to
Yeah.
say, ugh, that's too hard, or I can't do that because.
Yeah.
And I want to challenge you to and remind you that you are CEO of your own desk. And you can't
Mm.
lead anybody else until you lead yourself first. So you can do those things. We talked about this in the last episode. You can do those things regardless of other people respond to you with those 5 pillars. And I think that
Yeah.
is the thing I want to remind you listener of. And for me, I'm always after cultivating curiosity, being and like challenging perspectives. One of my core values is valor, which is a spirit that is moving to action. And so even it
Mm.
sometimes we think that means I've got to go do. Well, listening sometimes requires a lot of valor to sit
Yeah.
and really
I love that.
listen to somebody and to choose to respect when that is not what you are receiving. Is an act of valor, and so I think those are incredibly powerful. But I really want to hear your story. So rather than what I think
Yeah.
about your story,
I was just captured about Valor. I was like, yes, tell me more about Valor. To add to your brilliance, I love one of the principles we operate by within our organization is called the Tortoise Principle, and it comes from really the tortoise and the hare. And really, one thing that's been interesting is that in our society, we've created a lot of hares. It looks really good. It's flashy initially, but there's no long-lasting substantive change. And so for leaders, if you're saying like, well, how do I approach this? Take the tortoise principle. Maybe you don't start off with the biggest ideological challenge or ideological difference. Maybe you start off with something that's low to medium and what we call our ideological continuum. But the story for me that began part of this journey before I had a concept of 5 pillars was in 2019. I was going to go confront my dad for not being in my life growing up. And, you know, my parents divorced at 4, and I would see my dad every other weekend, and then it became 1 weekend a month, and then sometimes it was 2 or 3 years where I didn't see or talk to my dad for myriad of reasons. So in 2019, for some reason as I got older, it impacted me more. When I was younger, I was like, I just want to go skating and all that kind of stuff. But when I got older, I would sometimes pull off to the side of the road and just weep because I felt like I missed something. Now, what I'm not saying that because people had both parents or guardians in their life that they lived a perfect life, because I've heard those stories as
no,
well. But I was
no
gonna go
one's saying
confront my dad. Yeah, I was gonna confront my dad, Will Smith style, right? And not the Chris Rock version. Not no, let me be very clear. But the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air version.
no,
I'll be very
I'm
clear because there's 2 different levels.
listen to the story. Okay, sorry.
Yes, yes. So no, I love in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. If people hadn't seen that episode, check it out on YouTube. It's really quick. But his dad comes in his life. His dad wasn't in his life growing up, and he's so excited and pumped. And I'm getting emotional talking about it. And it's just pumped to go out and spend time with his dad. And his dad did what his dad did, and he doesn't tell Will he's leaving. Tells Uncle Phil like, hey, just tell him I'll see him next time.
Yeah.
And Will's like, it's cool. I'm gonna get married without him. I have kids without him. And what most people have no idea was an unscripted moment is that he falls into Uncle Phil's arms and he's like, why didn't he love me? And so that's what I was gonna go do with my dad. I was gonna go to God and it's like, why didn't you love me? Why didn't you fight for me? But because I have a really good therapist. And by the way, y'all leaders, all y'all listening, get therapy, y'all. It's not because there's something wrong with you, even though my kids may say
Yes.
something different, but it's because I want to keep things going right. That I get
Yes.
therapy. So because of my therapist and the Leadership Charlotte cohort, they challenged me from instead of going to confront my dad to going and hearing his story.
Hmm.
And
Ooh,
I had a
great
participant
shift.
come up after one of my sessions. She said it way better than I could have. She was like, Justin, they helped you turn a confrontation into a conversation.
Mhm.
And as went and it's like, Dad, I realized I never heard your story. I'd love to learn how you grew up and all these kind of things. And as I heard his story, I was like, wow. And I asked more questions. All right. And I was like, oh, tell me more about that. And I got to hear more about how his interaction with my mom. It's different perspectives and all these kind of things. And then I was able to find, oh, I better understand how he got there.
Mhm.
And I still was able to share my truth in love. And just in terms of but I started with being curious. I started by being a student. I started by challenging my perspective with my therapist and my Leadership Charlotte cohort because I just wanted to go tell my dad, you weren't there for me. You need to feel my pain. But I left there choosing to forgive my dad, not because he asked for it, but because I chose to engage in the manner of hearing a story, listening, engaging, finding that common ground. And
Mhm.
in forgiveness, Jen, what I didn't realize I'd been holding back all of these years was my heritage.
Mm.
Because my dad's from Ghana, my mom's from America. That makes me African American. People will get that next year. But the interesting thing is, I didn't realize that I'd been holding it back all these years because of what he represented.
Mm.
And so it washed over me. And what that made me think of in many of our lives, you have no idea the power of respectful disagreement and what it could produce in
Mm.
your life. The
Yeah.
forgiveness that could happen, the colleague that hurt you many years ago, that stabbed you in the back, that you've been harboring this hate or hard feelings for, and it actually is holding you back and not them back. And
Mhm.
these are the moments where we can engage in really powerful, respectful disagreements. And in that, and I'll end with this, is I walk through the 5 pillars, right? I challenge my perspective with my therapist and leadership Charlotte cohort. I was a student because pillar number 2, I said, Dad, I'd love to hear your story. My winning was learning. Pillar number 3, I cultivated curiosity. I used the framework that we created called not tell me more, but the power of 3. And if I didn't know what to say, tell me more, right? Pillar 4, I sought
It's my
the
favorite
gray,
question.
right? Yes. What's that gray space, right? Because not everything's black and white. And last but not least, is I agreed to respect. My plan was to humanize him, not to harm
Mhm.
him. And that's the power we have as leaders.
Absolutely. I mean, I have so much as I'm just sitting here thinking about the power of that story. First of all, just to contextualize the pillars, but also what it illustrates is a common it is the opposite of the common myth that who
Mm,
I am is not a part of how I lead, or that my
yeah,
personal life doesn't impact my leadership.
yeah,
Wherever you go, there you are. And your hurts come with you if you don't work on them. And you can only lead as far as you've healed. You can
mm,
only lead as far as you've healed. And what you did was a process of recognizing, oh, there is some unhealed relationship here. And the confrontation into a conversation was so powerful. And that is part of what brought the healing. And that forgiveness isn't for them. Forgiveness is for you. I mean, when I
yeah,
forgive somebody, it's for me. And I can remember one of the reasons I do the work that I do is because of a toxic work environment. And I was like, this isn't right. We didn't have that before. What happened? And
mm,
before I started doing this work, I was sitting at graduation because when I went back to grad school because I was an educator, so that solves all problems. But I was sitting at in graduation and thinking about how grateful I was for this experience, and there is no way that would have happened without this particular leader's faults. And
mm,
while we I if the opportunity arises, I would welcome a conversation, but it is so
yeah,
unlikely and not one that I necessarily need to go after, but I
right,
could still forgive,
yeah,
and I can still approach whatever has happened with curiosity, even if it's not a conversation with that person. I
yeah,
can still
that's
honor
so good.
his humanity. I say all the time, I have so much empathy for
Yeah,
what he was going through, and it is an example of when we don't solve our and heal our own wounds, we bleed on the people who didn't hurt us, and I have so
yeah,
much empathy for that, and I would hate to have been in that spot,
mm,
and again, back to that idea. And so who you are, so if you're listening to this and you're like, everything's great at work, but man, I got to go sit at Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa with my family this month. And
yeah,
how do I do that? I hope that you hear Justin's story of challenging your perspective, that maybe how they got
mm,
there isn't how you thought. And so maybe possibly listening to how they got there is incredibly powerful. I have a workshop that I do rarely, but it's based on 4 questions, and it's not even how do we solve conflict, it's how do we find the difference, how do we find the commonality in our differences?
mm,
And it's like, what do you love? What have you lost? You know,
mm,
what are you afraid of? and what do you hope for? Like
Yeah.
those 4 questions are so
Powerful.
powerful to open up to
Yeah.
anybody, whether you're sitting
Yeah.
across from the person who's in finance and you're in creative and y'all are constantly struggling, like
Yeah.
having coffee with somebody and finding that out. Or it's your uncle that, posts things on Facebook that sends you over the edge. And now you're sitting at dinner with them. Ask some questions.
Yeah.
You'll bring that into your leadership and it will make you, as you talked about in the first episode, how your mom brought you to Oktoberfest and the Polish
Yeah.
festival and the different things. It brings you into the story of somebody else and you realize their humanity in the midst of you're like, "Oh, I can see how you got there. I still
Yeah.
disagree, but your humanity is so evident that I can't deny it in this space." So sorry. I just
That's
loved your story. I think
no,
it
no, no.
illustrates.
First of all, I think that's brilliant. I think those 4 questions are so powerful. It reminded me of when we do the practice of our power of 3. One of the questions we ask is, "What's been a meaningful moment in your life that shaped who you are today?"
Mhm.
And the power of that is, we had one CEO that was like, "I've been working with this person for 35 years, and I thought I knew everything, and I'd never heard this." And so it made me realize that we're actually not asking at times meaningful questions as we're hearing people's stories,
Mhm.
including our family members. Like when it was, I thought I knew people's stories. I thought I knew my dad's story. I thought I knew my mom's story, and I realized like I never just point blank stopped and asked to hear their stories. And that's one thing I think that we can do as leaders. But one of the things that was powerful for me, a book, and really kind of transformative concept is Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry had a book called "What Happened to You,"
Mhm.
and it changed the narrative from "What's wrong with you."
Mhm.
And what I loved about that, because I was listening to the audiobook because they're doing it themselves, I definitely check out that book for all those who are listening. It led me to this place of like, wow, if we can find out and ask and be curious about what happened to people, even
Mhm.
in their own leadership. Let's talk about you as a leader. Let's forget that outside world, because it's really easy to talk about the outside world. Let's deal with us as a leader. What
Right.
happened to us that
Mhm.
has shaped who we are? Childhood, early career, promotions, firing,
Mhm.
addictions, all of these things that have shaped us. It allows us to better understand, to your point, all the places we've been that have been these moments that have emulated to who we are. And
Yeah.
so, as leaders, that's one of the things that we just want to go forward, but I want to be very intentional. Our model is a heart, head, hand model. It's not just giving tools and strategy and all that kind of stuff. It's doing the heart work. And
Yeah.
you'll just put some band-aids over stuff if you haven't truly done the heart work, which is why
Absolutely.
I'm a big advocate of therapy, a big
Mhm.
advocate of whatever that therapy looks like for you, and in terms of coaching and other things that people do really well, including yourself, Jen. But it's the hard work that has to happen before the hard work.
Absolutely. And I use a similar I love that you call it heart, head, and hand because I call it, as the Enneagram is this personality framework that I base a lot of my work
Hmm.
on, and the 3
I
centers
love
of
Enneagram.
intelligence are your feeling center, your doing
Mhm.
center, and your thinking center, and we need all
Yeah.
3 to be present, otherwise we're super lopsided, and when you're lopsided, you overcompensate. If you've ever had
Mm,
a knee injury or an ankle injury or a hip or whatever, like especially in that part of your body, you overcompensate on the other side and you then cause more pain rather
yeah.
than being I don't love the word balanced, but it does work. I love the word integrated when you have all 3 of
Yeah.
them working in concert. And as a musician, I think a lot about harmonies. And when those 3
Mm,
centers are working in harmony, you invite other people in. If you've ever I just don't know anybody who hears a brilliant harmony and like you feel it in your body, you lean in.
yeah.
And that's what it
Right.
feels like when you have a leader who is integrated. Not perfect, we're not going for perfection, but that
Correct.
idea of consistent dealing with my own stuff
Yeah.
in order to welcome other people in to deal with their stuff, we're all gonna get better because then we allow that to go out of our lives and we get to move forward. I
Yeah.
think that's what's so
That's
great
so
about the
good,
work.
Jen.
And I'm so grateful for the clarity of your pillars and like how do we actually start this work.
Yeah.
And Oh man, I have so many questions I want to ask you, and we're like running out of time. So, if you were going to leave us with a little bit of a challenge, I love the
Mhm.
continuum of don't start with the hardest thing ever. Start with something that is low to medium effort or low to medium impact. What is a challenge you might give somebody as we've had this, two-part conversation that you think would be really helpful for them as a leader in their entirety of their lives? Because we've already
Yeah.
mentioned you're a whole person, so you're bringing it with you.
Yeah. It's probably our most powerful tool people take away from our learning experiences, and that's the power of three.
Mm,
And in the power of three, essentially, it's how we listen to others. Because it can be very easy to say, listen more, seek to understand, but we don't really give people strategies on how to get there. And so, what we call most people kind of talk or have communication, what we call the double Dutch style of communication. And for those who don't double Dutch, it's two ropes that are going and somebody waiting to jump in, like wait for it, wait for it, wait for it, and they finally
wait,
jump
wait,
in, right?
wait.
And it's just like take a breath, take a pause, take a breath, and this is why I disagree with you, right? And then we just do that, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we often communicate is we're waiting to jump in.
Mhm,
We're waiting to tell them our perspective, our situation, our story, and we're not actually listening.
mhm.
Um, and we're listening in a very distracted way. And so the power of three, what we realize is that people stop at the power one and power two. I'll give you a great example. So, hey, Jen, how are you doing today? And you're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, I'm fine too. That's power of one. Power of two. Hey, Jen, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. What makes you fine? Oh, I heard this interesting bald head speaker. I remember that bald head speaker, right? That's power of two, right? Versus power of three is all of that above and like, oh, like what made him interesting?
Mhm.
Oh, he talked about, challenge, Circles of Grace challenge and one meaningful connection per week, moving to out the door policy, all this thing. And it's like, oh, is there anything else I can learn? But oftentimes we stop at the power of one or power of two
Mhm.
because we can't wait to get it back to
Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah.
And our challenge is, one of the things we're calling people out to do, including myself, is what if we sought to be more interested than interesting? And in our world and social media and all these things, we're creating these spaces where we want to be interesting to other people. We want to showcase our brilliance, our research, all these things. And that's why I hate networking events, is because I go into these while I go into these just seeking to be interested. And so when people are like, oh, what do you do? Da, 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 I'm asking more meaningful questions. And so as you as a leader, whether you're at home, whether you're at work, I want you to consider engaging in the power of three and
Mm.
simply listening deeper to people instead of jumping in. It's not because you're a narcissist, it's not because you're self absorbed. Oftentimes, we're simply trying to find connection.
Yeah.
But sometimes, in our desire to find connection, we end up taking control. So
Mhm.
instead of that next time a person says, hey, I went to this great seafood restaurant, instead of saying, but have you been to this one? What if we ask them what made it great? That's a way to deepen the level of relationship. And so no matter what sphere you're in as a leader, that's one practical way that you can do that. And I want to hit this home, even with our kids, even with
Absolutely.
our kids,
I
and
was
sometimes
literally thinking
especially
about
with
that.
them.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so powerful. So as a mom of 4 and 3 of them are in
Mm,
college, I don't get to and they're all at college away somewhere. And right now we have one who's in New Zealand, so he's not even in the country. And,
mm,
I was thinking about one of my favorite things is to listen to them tell me about their lives because they don't
yeah.
all the time now. Like if I want a response, sometimes I have to send a picture of the cat, then I'm
Right.
usually get some kind of it just depends. But I love hearing about how they spend their days and why that means something for them. And what I have found as a parent over time, that actually builds so much trust in them because they
Yeah,
feel seen. And that's the same
that's
thing
good.
that we do in the workplace. When you ask those interesting questions, sometimes we feel all kinds of awkward. You're like, oh, do I get to ask that question? And I don't know how to do that. And it's
Yeah,
just practice. But the power when someone has, you walk away going, gosh, like I feel so hurt. Like you feel so seen and heard. And that creates so much trust and the connection that we're all seeking. And I mean, I'm raising my hand, literally chief among them, and an interrupter. I want to engage with you because I want to find connection. I am constantly working on that of asking
mm,
more questions and listening more deeply than trying to get my thing in. And it's hard because I'm excited, and
yeah,
it's a practice. And I am. constantly and consistently working on it myself. And every time I do, I find it is so much more connective than,
Mm.
my old way. So, Justin, thank you for teaching us. Thank you for making this such a great learning experience. I don't want to stop. I'm so
I know
glad
you have to
that.
go. I want to ask you a question because I know
Oh,
you're
okay,
normally the
great.
question asker. So I want to ask
Mm,
you a question. Um,
I'm preparing.
where are you currently struggling with respectful disagreement? Not that you've gotten over it, and not even
Yeah.
that you have the solution yet, but where are you
Mhm.
currently struggling with respectful disagreement? Because the reason I ask that is because a lot of leaders and the things like it's great to create these tools and strategies and all this
Mhm.
stuff, but we're all struggling. On my writing retreat of
Yeah.
writing, I respectfully disagree. I disrespectfully disagreed with someone. So let me be very clear, like we are not there. So where for you are you currently struggling with respectful
Yeah, I
disagreement?
love this question, and as somebody who's currently writing a book, like, it works like, the things that I am required to do means I have to do what I'm teaching, I can't,
Yeah.
like, just put it out there in the world, and I think right now, for me, I am struggling to respectfully disagree when it feels illogical. Like, when
Mm,
I deem it illogical, and I'm very aware that I am deeming it illogical,
yeah.
even though it feels like I can demonstrate why it's illogical,
Right.
like that wrestle. So when somebody is, saying things that are disparate, it doesn't
Mm,
make sense. You are contradicting yourself. I
mm,
really wanna bring that, like, front and center, and I have to
right.
create more space between
Good.
the stimulus and response. And to be really transparent about it, I live in Missouri. There are some big issues on our ballot right now. We are
Mm,
recording this before really close, a couple days before the election. And to respectfully disagree around some of these that feel shocking to some people based on how I grew up,
mm,
the community that I grew up in a very conservative evangelical space, to still really own my faith and who I am,
yeah,
but be different in how I practice that
yeah.
is shocking and hard for some people. And I
Mm,
find it shocking and hard that the cognitive dissonance that I'm experiencing
mm,
from what I deem as their lack of logic.
yeah,
And I really constantly have to bring back that idea of how they got there.
yeah,
I might not get there in the same way, but it's so hard because it feels like so
yeah,
much at stake. It feels like so much is at stake, and I have to come back to their belonging, their humanity, what I would say they bear the image of God, regardless of if you believe in God or not. I think that
yeah,
and believe that about people. I have to keep bringing that back because it is so easy to just dismiss and to be dismissive, which is therefore very disrespectful. So I think
yeah.
that's where I am right now.
First of all, one, thank you for your vulnerability. Like I think in vulnerability is true joy. And thank you for sharing that. And so I'll end with the story I said I would share the story of
Yeah.
Daryl
Tell us about
because I
Daryl.
think where you are is in that space, and where I am, and all of us in many ways. So Daryl was a blues musician, African American, black male blues musician who befriended Ku Klux Klan members,
Mm,
and not when they were getting out, but right where they were. And because of his choice to humanize, to respect, to engage, over 200 Ku Klux Klan members gave up their robes because of Daryl's friendship. And so, I end with this: what if, in our disagreements, we're simply seed planters of
yeah.
respect? You never know, right? And when we approach people, not from a superior self where if you just knew more than I knew, naive
Right.
realism.
Yeah.
If we approach people not from inferior self of, oh, they're probably better, they have more knowledge, but from an equal self, it
Mm,
allows us to plant those seeds because you never know what may come, even in those moments where the disagreement is big.
mhm.
But when we're closed minded, we should never stop being open hearted.
Absolutely. And there's so much that we don't actually know that will happen. And yet,
Yeah.
when I look back at my 40 plus years of experience of living life,
Mm.
there have been
You said
times where
30 plus?
I said 40 plus,
You said
nearly
30 plus?
nearly 50 years of living life.
30
Uh,
plus.
it's sure, it is actually true as well. I mean, technically 20 plus, but, as I look back in that, there have been times where people that I said something to them at 12
Yeah.
that was shockingly open-hearted. Wouldn't say that was my MO at the time, but, like, they have come back at 36, at 39, at
Yeah.
42 to say, "This is what that did." And so we don't
Mm.
know, but when I look back, I will always say that the better choice was open-heartedness and respect
Yeah.
every single time.
That's
So,
awesome.
oh,
Thank you for sharing your
we
story.
could keep talking forever. How do we keep talking to you? Tell us how to connect with you, how to stay with you. If you want to get Justin's book, you can grab it here on the QR code and we'll put it in the show notes for you. But we want to hear from you. What's the best way to keep up with you? Keep
I
learning.
love LinkedIn. I
Mhm.
love learning from people and engaging with people on LinkedIn. I'm Justin Jones-Fosu there. But you can go to workmeaningful.com, which is the work that we do. And to even deepen that is howtorespectfullydisagree.com, where we're talking about all the things. And our respectful disagreement quiz is coming out. So you can see where you are. It's not about perfection, but how do we move forward and progress.
Mhm. Well, thank you again so much for being here. We appreciate your time, your expertise, your heart, your caring, your vulnerability, and sharing your stories. And I think that is how we continue to move forward and make this world meaningful, more joyful, more rooted, and more connected. So thank you for your time and
Thank
expertise.
you
We
for your
appreciate it.
brilliance. Thank you,
Oh,
Jen. You're awesome.
thanks so much. Bye, everybody. So let me put my coach hat on for just a moment. Don't just leave this here. Take a moment. What did you learn? What's your next tiny action step? Share this episode with someone and tell them what you're going to do. Check the show notes for all the links and connect with us on LinkedIn and all the other socials, or just, drop me an email at Jen with 2 N's at JennWhitmer.com. We want to keep this conversation going with you. I know your earballs have a lot coming at them, so thank you for listening to the Joyosity podcast and being a part of our community. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe. It helps more people join us in the movement to create positive culture with complex people. So work is a joy, people are whole, and organizations flourish. Can't wait for you to join us next week.